You're watching the legal breakdown. So, Glenn, we've got a pretty stunning development as far as trial dates are concerned here, and this really does seem like huge news. So, Jack Smith just proposed a July 8th trial date in the Florida classified documents case. But here's the important part: Donald Trump's attorneys offered August 12th as an alternative. So, if Jack Smith wants July and Donald Trump's team wants August, and both parties are in agreement that this thing should start in the summer, then might we actually see this classified documents trial kick off this summer?
Brian, you're right. This is huge news. It's a potential victory for justice and accountability, but it may be short-lived. So I'm not ready to celebrate yet. I'm not dancing in the end zone. But here's what happened. So as of right now, there is a trial date set down in Florida, and it was set many months ago by Donald Trump's favorite judge, Judge Aileen Cannon, who seems to side with Donald Trump at every turn in this litigation. So she set a May 20th trial date. Nobody really expected that to stick. But now what we have is a new court filing where Jack Smith has said, okay, we can give the defense, Donald Trump, a little bit more time, and we're proposing a July 8th trial date. And as you say, Donald Trump really surprisingly, through his lawyers, said, you know what, Judge, we don't think we can go to trial before the election. But if push comes to shove, we could accept an August 12th trial date. That is a surprise because what do we know about Donald Trump? He's all about delay, 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 hoping to delay all of his criminal cases until after the November election. So in the event he's elected, he could kill them all. At least I think that is his strategy. So I was really surprised when his attorneys countered with a possible trial date of August 12th. The reason I say this may be a short-lived victory for justice and accountability is because tomorrow, Friday, March 1st, this case is up in court down in Florida. And among other things, they're going to be talking about possible trial dates. So it seems like with the prosecutor saying July and Trump saying August, there ought to be a trial date set sometime in July or August. But let's see what Judge Cannon does, because we still have that issue that is now sort of the dark cloud hanging over Trump accountability. And it is the Supreme Court deciding they're going to take up this absurd claim that Donald Trump may have absolute immunity to commit all the crimes he wants while president and not be prosecuted for it. So I have a feeling that new development, knowing that the Supreme Court will take up that issue and will not even hear oral arguments for 2 months down the road in late April, and who knows when they'll decide it after that. I think that will also be a central focus of tomorrow's Friday's hearing before Judge Cannon. So as I say, I'm not dancing in the end zone, but I'm feeling a little bit more optimistic that we may actually get a federal criminal prosecution underway against Donald Trump sometime this summer.
Well, here's the million-dollar question, and I can feel the viewers yelling this question at their computer screens, at their phones right now. Why would Donald Trump's team offer such a reasonable date as an alternative?
I wish I had a good answer for the viewers. I'm going to come up short here, Brian, because what we know is for years, Donald Trump always tries to run out the clock on accountability. He does it in his civil cases. He does it in his criminal cases. So I really hate to speculate that somehow the fix is in and somehow they already know that Judge Cannon is prepared to kick this trial in Florida until after the 2024 presidential election. So they think there's relatively little risk at appearing reasonable and saying, well, how about August? Because somehow through back channels, they may know that Judge Cannon is already prepared to kick it, much farther down the road than August. That's pure speculation. But, I never think that Donald Trump and his lawyers' motives are pure and they actually, are prepared to go to trial in August, which frankly, in the case down in Florida, people refer to that as the classified documents case. That's not the way to refer to it, because it's really the illegal retention of government documents case, the obstruction of justice case because he refused to return the documents when they were subpoenaed by a grand jury as part of a criminal investigation. And it is an espionage case because Donald Trump unlawfully retained information that is classified as national defense information. So charges were brought under our nation's espionage laws, under the Espionage Act. That is the most accurate way to refer to that, a Florida federal prosecution. So, if it actually gets up and running in August, we could have a result, and I'm going to say that result will be a conviction because we've all seen pictures of the boxes
Right.
of classified documents in Donald Trump's bathrooms and ballrooms. He will undoubtedly be convicted on the evidence as long as a fair and impartial jury is impaneled, probably by early fall. I would say, maybe September, October at the latest. And again, in advance of the November 2024 presidential election. So what the American voters will know at that point is whether they are voting for somebody who compromised some of our nation's most closely guarded national security secrets. So, that seems to be an important bit of information for the American voter to have when they go to the polls in November.
Glenn, if both the prosecution and the defense are seeking a trial in the summer, is there a reason normally in a normal situation why the judge would defy both of them?
The only reason a judge would defy both of them is if there was some kind of a conflict on the court's calendar. What do I mean by that? Judges will carry several criminal cases on their caseload, on their docket, and they will set trials sort of one after another after another. So sometimes if a judge expects to be in trial for, let's say, 6 weeks, and both the prosecutor and the defense attorney in another case want to insert their trial into that 6-week stretch of time on the judge's calendar, the judge will reject it and say, no, I have to push it another 2 months down the road because of my docket, my calendar schedule. That's not at all unusual. I will say it's far more usual in state court, where you have lots and lots and lots of cases that judges carry, whereas federal court, the dockets are significantly lower and more manageable. It's just the nature of federal prosecution. That's the only reason I can think of why a judge would say that date is not good for the court, even if it's being proposed by both parties. But I'll tell you, I now have a heightened interest in what will happen in that Florida courtroom on Friday.
And let's talk about that. Now, what can we expect to happen in the courtroom? What's the question that they're being posed with right now?
So there are a number of questions. They're largely scheduling questions. And Jack Smith sort of forecast some of that in the motion that he just filed. He said, look, I know there are a number of dates that the court will have to set for some motions, hearings, for some briefs to be filed, and for those briefs to be responded to, for jury selection to start. So I think tomorrow will be a scheduling heavy, Friday will be a scheduling heavy discussion in court. There may be some things of substance taken up, but I think really the big ticket issue at the end of the day, and frankly, I'll be on the edge of my seat, is will this federal prosecution against Donald Trump actually get up and running this summer? If so, I think that is a really important development for our democracy and for the prospect of having fully informed voters going to the polls in November.
And will this question of when the trial date is actually going to be selected, will that be determined tomorrow?
It should be. It looks like the issue has now been met by both parties with these filings. I am hard pressed to see why the judge can't resolve this tomorrow and say, listen, all I really have to do now is perhaps split the difference. I'll be Solomonic about it. I'll split the difference, if not the baby, and set it sometime between the two dates that have been proposed by the parties, July 8th for the prosecution, August 12th for the defense. Let's start August 1st. I mean, that would make perfect sense. And I think it's unlikely that something will pop up that will result in the judge saying, I can't really reach a decision on a trial date today. That's ordinarily not how this kind of issue plays out.
I know that you talk about justice goosebumps all the time. I feel like we were getting justice whiplash this week. First with the decision from the Supreme Court to take up the question of immunity, and now from, this classified documents case where we may actually see a trial happen before the election.
Yeah, I often use the phrase justice is an e-ticket ride. And I think you have to be a certain age to know that an e-ticket refers to like the most dramatic rides at Disneyland and Disney World, but this was decades ago. They did away with the ticket books, but the e-ticket was the ticket you had to rip out of the Disneyland book to go on the most thrilling rides that Disney had. So, Justice is an e-ticket ride.
Well, we'll leave it there. Obviously, we will watch what happens tomorrow, Friday, very closely. So for those watching right now, if you want to follow along and hear what happens as soon as that news breaks, please make sure to follow along and subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on the screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.